I died at 28 with one hand, in a studio apartment I could barely afford, 3 years after the fire that took my right hand and my boyfriend's respect in the same night. The last thing I remember was staring at my prosthetic hand resting on the nightstand. The cheap one insurance barely covered after Brandon left and took his premium health plan with him. The good prosthetic, the one that looked almost real, had been repossessed 6 months earlier when I couldn't make payments. My name is Maya Chun, and I spent 5 years with Brandon Parker. 3 before the fire, 2 after, watching the man I'd pulled from flames look at me with increasing disgust every single day until he finally left me for someone whole. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in my sad little studio. I was 25, standing in Brandon's apartment, our apartment, with both hands intact, watching him check his reflection in the mirror before our date night. "Babe, does this shirt make me look too bulky?" Brandon asked, flexing slightly. "I don't want to look like I'm trying too hard." I stared at my right hand. Whole. Functional. Attached to my body where it belonged, not lying in some medical waste bag 3 years in the future. 2.5 years. That's how long I had until the electrical fire that would start in Mrs. Patterson's apartment downstairs, spread 2 hours, and trap Brandon in the bedroom while I was in the kitchen. 2.5 years until I would drag him out through smoke and flames, my hand crushed under a falling beam when I pushed him through the doorway first. 2.5 years until he would visit me once in the hospital, look at my bandaged stump, and say, "I can't do this, Maya. I can't be with someone who's broken. I'm sorry. Maya? Hello." Brandon snapped his fingers in front of my face. "Are you even listening?" I asked about the shirt. "It's fine," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Fine? That's all you've got? I'm trying to look good for you and you can't even." He stopped, studying me. "Are you okay? You look weird." I looked at Brandon, really looked at him, and saw what I'd been too in love to see before. The way he angled himself toward every reflective surface. The way he checked his phone constantly, not for work, but to see if anyone had commented on his latest gym selfie. The way he talked about other women, rating them like products, unaware that he was telling me exactly how he'd rate me if my value dropped. "I'm fine," I said. "Just tired." "Again? You're always tired lately. Maybe you should work out more. I keep telling you, the gym would give you energy." In my previous life, I'd let comments like that slide. Laughed them off. Convinced myself he was just trying to help. This time, I heard them for what they were, warnings. Over the next few weeks, I watched Brandon with new eyes. I noticed that he never asked about my day unless he wanted to talk about his own. That he'd interrupt me mid-sentence to take selfies. That he'd check out other women openly when we were together, then get angry if I looked uncomfortable. I noticed that all his stories painted him as the hero. The guy who worked harder, lifted more, earned more respect than anyone else at the gym, at work, anywhere. And how he needed me to validate these stories constantly. You think I was right to tell off that new guy at the gym, don't you? He was using the squat rack wrong and I had to educate him. Someone has to maintain standards. I'd say, which used to be enthusiastic agreement. Now it was just noise to make him stop talking. I also noticed his friends. How they were all exactly like him. Vain, shallow men who treated their girlfriends like accessories that needed to match their aesthetic. How they'd joke about trading up when women gained weight or aged or stopped being Instagram-worthy. And I realized, Brandon hadn't changed after the fire. He'd always been this person. I'd just been useful to him. Pretty enough to photograph, fit enough to gym with, agreeable enough to reflect his greatness back at him. The fire had just made me unuseful. And people like Brandon discarded things that stopped being useful. "Babe, we need to talk about something," Brandon said one evening, about 3 months into my second chance. "What?" "Your social media. You haven't been posting us lately. My follower engagement is down because you're not tagging me in anything. People are asking if we broke up." I stared at him. "Your follower engagement?" "Yeah. It matters for my personal brand. I'm trying to build a fitness coaching business, and couple content performs really well. But you have to actually post." "What if I don't want to?" Brandon's face hardened. "What's your problem lately? You've been acting weird for weeks. Distant. Like you don't even care about us anymore." Maybe I don't. The words came out before I could stop them. And once they were out, I realized I meant them. Brandon's mouth fell open. What? Maybe I don't care about your follower count. Maybe I don't care about being your content. Maybe I'm tired of being your supporting character. Supporting character? I make you look good. Do you know how many guys would love to date someone like you? And you're complaining. There it was. The truth he usually kept buried under compliments and pet names. I was lucky to have him. I should be grateful. I was replaceable. You're right, I said calmly. Lots of guys would love to date me. Maybe I should find out. Brandon's face went through several expressions: shock, anger, calculation. You're breaking up with me? Yes. Over me asking you to post on social media? Are you insane? No. I'm done. I want you out of my apartment by the end of the week. Your apartment? We've been living together for 2 years. An MY apartment. That MY name is on the lease for. That I pay 2/3 of the rent for. You have until Friday. I turned and walked to the bedroom, locking the door behind me. Brandon pounded on it for 10 minutes, alternating between apologies and anger, before finally leaving. I sat on the bed, staring at my right hand in the lamplight. Whole. Undamaged. Free. And I'd just saved it from being destroyed for a man who would have hated me for the sacrifice. Brandon moved out that Friday, making a huge dramatic production of it. Posting on social media about how I was crazy and couldn't handle a real man. His gym friends flooded the comments with support, trashing me as a jealous girlfriend who couldn't appreciate what she had. I blocked all of them and didn't respond. My friend Lisa came over that night with wine. I saw Brandon's posts. Are you okay? I'm perfect. Really? Because breaking up with someone you've been with for 2 years usually hurts more than this. I looked at Lisa, my best friend since college, who'd quietly disapproved of Brandon for years, but never said anything because I'd seemed happy. Can I tell you something that's going to sound insane? Always. Brandon was going to destroy my life. I don't know how I know, but I know. And I got out before he could. Lisa studied me for a long moment. You know what? I believe you. That guy always gave me bad vibes. Like everything was transactional with him. Exactly. So what now? What's your plan? I thought about my previous life. After the fire, I'd struggled to find work with one hand. My graphic design career had crumbled. Clients didn't want to hire the disabled girl, even though I could still design. I'd ended up in customer service, barely scraping by, drowning in medical debt. This time, I had both hands. I had time. I had knowledge of what was coming. I'm going to build something, I said. Something that's actually mine. Not content for his brand. Not an accessory to his life. Mine. I started working on my portfolio that night. In my previous life, I'd let it stagnate while I poured energy into supporting Brandon's dreams. This time, I updated it obsessively. I reached out to old professors, old colleagues, anyone who might have freelance work. I took on small projects, logos, websites, branding packages. I worked late nights and weekends, building a client base. And I researched fire safety. I knew the fire was coming. Mrs. Patterson's apartment, electrical wiring, February of next year. It would happen at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday when she was running too many space heaters on old circuits. I couldn't stop Mrs. Patterson from using space heaters. She was elderly and chronically cold, and convinced modern heating was too expensive. But I could prepare. I bought renter's insurance with extensive coverage. I documented all my belongings with photos and receipts. I backed up all my digital work to cloud storage. I created emergency evacuation plans for every room. And most importantly, I started apartment hunting. I needed to be out before February. Brandon, meanwhile, was spiraling. His fitness coaching business wasn't taking off. Turned out posting gym selfies didn't actually translate into paying clients. His day job at the sports equipment store barely covered his rent. Without me paying 2/3 of his living expenses, he was struggling. He started texting me. First angry messages. Then apologetic ones. Then desperate ones. Maya, can we talk? I miss you. I made a mistake. You were the best thing in my life. I'm sorry about the social media thing. I was being shallow. Can we try again? I didn't respond to any of them. 3 months after our breakup, he showed up at my apartment. Maya, please. Just hear me out. No. I've changed. I've been going to therapy. I realize I was taking you for granted. Brandon, you need to leave. Just give me 5 minutes. 5 minutes to prove I'm different now. I looked at him through the cracked door. Chain still latched. He looked worse, thinner, tired, desperate in a way that had nothing to do with missing me, and everything to do with missing my financial contribution. You haven't changed, I said. You're just broke. His face shifted, anger flashing through before he caught himself. That's not fair. You posted that I was crazy and couldn't handle you. You let your friends trash me online. You turned our breakup into content. And now you want me back because your life is harder without me. That's not love, Brandon. That's convenience. You don't understand what it's been like. I understand perfectly. You need someone to subsidize your lifestyle while you build your brand. You need content. You need financial support. You don't need me. You never did. I closed the door. He knocked for another 10 minutes before finally leaving. Lisa helped me move in December, 2 months before the fire. My new apartment was smaller but mine. No Brandon's gym equipment cluttering the living room. No content creation happening in every space. Just my work, my things, my life. You know Brandon's been dating someone new? Lisa mentioned while we unpacked boxes. Good for him. That's it. No jealousy? No curiosity? None. She's welcome to him. Her name is Ashley. She's a yoga instructor. Very Instagram-worthy. I thought about Ashley, whoever she was, and hoped she'd figure out what Brandon was before she wasted too much time on him. But that wasn't my responsibility. February came. On the Tuesday I remembered, I checked the news obsessively. At 11:47 p.m., my phone lit up with an alert. Major apartment fire on Riverside Street. Multiple injuries. Building evacuated. My old building. My old apartment. Where Brandon was now living with Ashley because she'd moved into their place after I'd left. I sat on my couch, staring at the alert, my right hand trembling slightly. In my previous timeline, that fire had taken my hand, had destroyed my career, my finances, my relationship, had left me disabled and alone. This time, I was safe, 20 blocks away, completely untouched. I should have felt relief, victory, something. Instead, I felt sick, because Brandon was in that building, and Ashley, and Mrs. Patterson, and all the other residents who'd been my neighbors. I grabbed my phone and called 911. There's a fire at the Riverside Apartments. I used to live there. I know the building. The back stairwell is clearer than the front. And Mrs. Patterson in 2C is elderly and hard of hearing. Someone needs to check on her specifically. The operator took my information, thanked me, and hung up. I spent the rest of the night watching news coverage, my hands clenched together, my right hand, whole, undamaged, mine, pressing against my left. By morning, the news reported, building destroyed. 15 residents displaced. 7 injured, 3 seriously. 2 fatalities. Mrs. Patterson had died of smoke inhalation before firefighters reached her, and another resident had suffered a heart attack during evacuation. Brandon was among the seriously injured. The news showed footage of him being loaded into an ambulance, his face and hands bandaged, Ashley crying beside him. I turned off the TV and sat in silence. I'd saved myself. I'd escaped. I'd protected my hand, my career, my life. And I'd let others burn. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I ran to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left. Lisa found me there an hour later when I didn't answer her calls. She let herself in with the spare key and found me on the bathroom floor. Maya, what happened? The fire. My old building. I knew it was going to happen and I didn't stop it. How could you possibly have known? I just did. And I didn't warn anyone. I just saved myself. And Mrs. Patterson died. And Brandon. My voice broke. Lisa pulled me into her arms. Listen to me. You called 911. You gave them information that helped. You can't blame yourself for a fire you didn't start. But I could have done more. What more? Knocked on every door warning about a fire that hadn't happened yet? They'd have thought you were crazy. You did what you could. The rest isn't on you. But it felt like it was on me. For weeks, I couldn't shake the guilt. I'd saved my hand. I'd protected my future. And other people had paid the price. I started volunteering at the hospital burn unit. I told myself it was to help, to give back, to do something useful with the future I'd protected. Really, I was looking for Brandon. I found him 6 weeks after the fire. He was in recovery, his face and hands still bandaged, sitting alone in a therapy room working with a physical therapist on basic hand movements. His right hand was heavily scarred. The burns had been severe. The therapist was helping him pick up small objects, a task I'd watched burn victims struggle with for months in my previous life, only I'd been the one struggling. Brandon looked up and saw me in the doorway. His expression went through several changes: surprise, confusion, shame. Maya. Brandon. The physical therapist looked between us. Do you two know each other? We used to date, I said. Before the fire. Brandon's laugh was bitter. Before I became this. I'll give you some privacy, the therapist said, leaving. I walked into the room and sat down across from Brandon. Up close, the damage was obvious. Burns covered his right cheek and neck. His hands, both of them, were covered in scarring, the skin pink and tight and clearly painful. Why are you here? Brandon asked. I volunteer in the burn unit. Of course you do. Perfect, Maya. Helping the broken people. His voice was caustic. Did you come to gloat? To see what happened to the guy who was too good for you? No. Then why? I looked at his hands, damaged, scarred, impaired in ways that would take months of therapy to even partially recover from. The same hands he'd used to take selfies, to flex for the camera, to build his entire identity around physical perfection. I came to see if you were okay. Brandon laughed again, sharp and mean. Do I look okay? I've got burns over 30% of my body. My modeling aspirations are done. My fitness coaching business is done. Hell, I can barely hold a fork without my hands hurting. Ashley left me 2 weeks ago because she couldn't handle the visual situation. So no, Maya, I'm not okay. I'm sorry. Are you though? Or are you just here to feel superior? To watch the guy who dumped you get what he deserved? I never wanted this for you. Bullshit. Everyone wants this for people who hurt them. You're just too polite to admit it. I stood to leave. This had been a mistake. Wait, Brandon said. I'm sorry. I'm not handling this well. Obviously. I turned back. I've had a lot of time to think, Brandon continued, not meeting my eyes. About what happened. About us. About who I was. And you were right. About everything. I was shallow. I was using you. I didn't actually love you. I loved what you did for me. And I'm sorry. Thank you. Is that why you're here? To hear me apologize? No. I'm here because I lived through this in another life. Brandon's head snapped up. What? I shouldn't have said it. But sitting there, watching him struggle with movements my previous self had struggled with, the words came out. I was in your position once. Burned. Scarred. Disabled. Abandoned by someone I'd sacrificed everything for. And I know what's coming for you. The stares, the pity, the way people treat you like you're broken. I know how hard it is. How could you possibly know? Because I saved you in another timeline. I pulled you out of the fire and lost my hand doing it. And you left me because I wasn't perfect anymore. And I spent 3 years alone, broke, and struggling before I died. So yeah, Brandon. I know. He stared at me like I was insane. Maybe I was. You're saying you went back in time? That's insane. Probably. But it's true. And this time I chose differently. I saved myself instead of you. And I've spent 6 weeks feeling guilty about it. Wondering if I'm a monster for protecting my hand while yours got destroyed. Are you serious right now? Completely. Brandon was quiet for a long time. Then, if what you're saying is true, if you really did save me before and I left you, then you're not a monster. You're smarter than I was. What? I left Ashley. Or she left me. Whatever. The point is, the second things got hard, she was gone. And I blamed her for being shallow. But I was exactly the same with you, wasn't I? The second you weren't perfect, I bailed. Yes. So if you'd saved me this time, I would have left you again. Because that's who I was. Maybe still am, I don't know. I'm not exactly in a position to be picky about relationships anymore. The bitter self-awareness in his voice was new. The old Brandon, my Brandon, had never had that. You're going to be okay, I said. Recovery is hard, but you'll adapt. You'll find new ways to do things. You'll... Stop. Please. I don't need the inspirational speech. I need... He gestured helplessly with his scarred hands. I need to not be the guy I was. Because that guy destroyed everything good in his life chasing things that didn't matter. I sat back down. Do you have family helping you? My mom's been here. My dad sends money but doesn't visit. He can't handle seeing me like this. Friends from the gym stopped coming after the first week. Turns out when you're not useful as a workout buddy, people stop caring. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm learning what you already knew. That I surrounded myself with people exactly like me. And people like me don't stick around when things get hard. Over the next few months, I visited Brandon regularly at the hospital, and then at his mother's house where he was recovering. I told myself it was guilt. It was volunteering. It was making sure he was okay. Really, I think I was trying to understand who he would have been if the fire had happened to him instead of me in my first life. If he would have learned these lessons. If he would have changed. The answer was complicated. Brandon did change. The visible scarring and impaired hand function made it impossible for him to maintain his old identity. He couldn't be the fitness guy, the model, the selfie king. He had to find new ways to matter. He started a blog about burn recovery. Honest, raw posts about the physical and emotional struggles. It gained a following, not the thousands he'd dreamed of for his fitness brand, but hundreds of people who were going through similar experiences and needed to know they weren't alone. You inspired this, Brandon told me one day 6 months after the fire. We were at a coffee shop, his hands still stiff as he picked up his cup with both palms. Inspired what? This. The writing. The honesty. You used to be a graphic designer, right? Before we dated. During. I still am. I remember you working on your laptop late at night, and me interrupting you for attention. I never actually asked what you were working on. Never cared. And now I'm doing the same thing, trying to build something real instead of just looking good for the camera. I'm glad. Are you? Really? Because I feel like I'm copying you. Like I'm trying to be the person you always were, and I never appreciated. I looked at Brandon, this new version, scarred and humbled and genuinely trying, and felt a confusing mix of emotions. You're not copying me. You're becoming who you should have been all along. Better late than never? Something like that. 8 months after the fire, Brandon asked me to dinner. As friends, he clarified quickly. I know I destroyed any chance of us being more than that. But I'd like to buy you dinner. To thank you for helping me through this. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything. You could have left me to drown in my own misery and instead you showed up, week after week, helping a guy who treated you like garbage. That matters. So I went to dinner. We talked about his recovery, his blog, his plans to maybe go back to school for physical therapy since he understood the process now. He asked about my design work. Actually asked, with genuine interest. It was the first real conversation we'd ever had. After dinner, walking to my car, Brandon stopped me. Maya, can I ask you something? Sure. That story you told me. About going back in time, about saving me and losing your hand. Was it true? I'd half expected him to have forgotten, or dismissed it as a stress-induced delusion. Yes. And you chose to save yourself this time instead of me? Yes. Good. I'm glad you did. What? I'm glad you chose yourself. Because the guy you would have saved wasn't worth saving. He would have abandoned you just like I abandoned you in that other timeline. And you would have spent years suffering for someone who didn't deserve your sacrifice. Brandon. This version of me, the one who got burned, who had to rebuild everything, who learned what actually matters, he's better than that other guy would have been. So maybe it's better this way. I needed to lose everything to understand what was important. And you needed to save yourself to have the life you deserve. We stood there in the parking lot, and I realized he was right. In my previous life, I'd saved Brandon and he'd destroyed me with his rejection. In this life, I'd saved myself and he'd destroyed himself with his vanity. And somehow, we'd both ended up better for it. Do you ever wish things were different? I asked. Every day. But not the way you think. I wish I'd been a better person when we were together. I wish I'd appreciated you. I wish I'd been someone worth your sacrifice. But I wasn't. And no amount of wishing changes that. You're being too hard on yourself. No, I'm being honest for the first time in my life. And it's because of you. Because you showed me what strength actually looks like. Not muscles and Instagram followers. Real strength. The strength to choose yourself when everyone tells you to be selfless. The strength to walk away from someone who doesn't value you. The strength to survive and build something real. 1 year after the fire, I was at a gallery opening for a client whose brand identity I'd designed. My business had grown significantly. I had steady clients, good income, and a reputation for clean, modern design work. Brandon was there. I designed his blog's branding too, pro bono at first, but he'd insisted on paying me once his sponsorships came through. You came, I said, surprised. Of course. You designed the whole identity system for this brand. I wanted to see it in the real world. His hands were still scarred but more functional now. He could grip things, type, do most tasks even if they took longer. His face still bore obvious burn marks, but he didn't try to hide them anymore. Are you here with someone? I asked. My mom and my therapist both said I should start dating again. I'm not ready. He paused. Are you? I've been on a few dates. Nothing serious. Good. You deserve someone who sees how incredible you are. So do you. Maybe someday. For now, I'm focusing on not being the asshole I used to be. We stood together, watching people admire the branding I'd created, and I realized something important. I'd spent months feeling guilty for saving myself, for protecting my hand while others burned, for choosing my future over Brandon's present. But guilt was the wrong emotion. I'd made the right choice. The only choice. And everyone, even Brandon, was better for it. 2 years after the fire, Brandon invited me to his physical therapy clinic. He'd finished school and gotten certified as a PT specializing in burn recovery. I wanted you to see this, he said, showing me around the space. This whole thing exists because of you. Because of me? Because you showed me what it looked like to build something real. To help people instead of just using them. To matter for the right reasons. You did this yourself, Brandon. I did it with your example. And I wanted to thank you properly. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check, substantial, and a note. For the hand you didn't lose saving me. For the life you built instead. Thank you for choosing yourself. Brandon, I can't accept this. You can and you will. It's not payment. It's acknowledgement. Of what you sacrificed in another timeline. Of what you chose in this one. Of the fact that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is save yourself first. I looked at the check, then at Brandon, scarred, humbled, genuinely kind in ways he'd never been before. Are we friends now? I asked. I hope so. Real friends. Not the performance we had before. I'd like that. 3 years after the fire, I was at my studio working late when Brandon called. Turn on the news. Channel 7. I pulled up the stream on my laptop. It was a story about apartment fire safety, featuring Brandon talking about his experience, and the importance of working smoke detectors and updated electrical systems. They interviewed me for 20 minutes, Brandon said. Used maybe 2. But they showed the clinic and mentioned the blog, and I've gotten 50 new follower requests in the last hour. People who need help. Who are where I was 3 years ago. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of me too. That's new. It looks good on you. After we hung up, I sat at my desk staring at my hands. Both intact. Both functional. Both capable of creating, designing, building the life I had now. I thought about the other Maya. The one who'd saved Brandon and lost everything. The one who'd died alone and broken, wondering why her sacrifice hadn't been enough. And I understood finally. Her sacrifice hadn't been wrong. Loving someone wasn't wrong. Trying to save someone wasn't wrong. But losing yourself in the process was. In my previous life, I'd saved Brandon at the cost of myself. And he'd taught me that some people will accept your sacrifice without ever valuing it. Will take your hand, literally, and still walk away. In this life, I'd saved myself first. And the absence of my sacrifice had forced Brandon to find his own strength, to become someone worth knowing. Both versions of me had loved him. But only one version had loved herself more. And that version was alive, successful, whole. For years after the fire, Lisa threw me a birthday party. Small gathering at my apartment. Friends from work, some clients who'd become friends, people I actually cared about. Brandon came with his girlfriend Sarah, a teacher he'd met through his burn recovery support group after she'd been injured in a car accident. They were good together, both of them comfortable with scars and imperfection and real conversation. "Happy birthday, Maya," Brandon said, handing me a gift bag. Inside was a framed photo, Brandon and me at his clinic's opening, both smiling genuinely. "I wanted you to have this," he said, as a reminder of what's possible when people choose growth over ego. "Thank you." "No. Thank you. For saving yourself instead of me. For showing me that real strength isn't carrying someone else. It's knowing when to let them stand on their own." After everyone left, I sat on my couch looking at the photo. Brandon's scarred hands were visible in the frame, clasped together. My whole hand rested on his shoulder. In another life, our positions would have been reversed. I would have been the scarred one. He would have been whole. And he would have left. In this life, we'd both survived. Both changed. Both became better than we'd been. And I had both my hands. I picked up my phone and pulled up old photos from before the fire. Me and Brandon at the gym. Me and Brandon at restaurants. Me and Brandon taking selfies for his Instagram. In every single photo, I was looking at him. He was looking at the camera. I deleted them all. Then I opened my design software and started working on a new project. A series about self-preservation and the difference between sacrifice and self-destruction. Art that would go in my portfolio, maybe become prints, maybe just exist for me. I worked until 3 a.m., my right hand moving across the tablet stylus, creating lines and shapes and meaning. Both hands. Whole. Mine. 5 years after the fire, I got a call from a documentary filmmaker. They were doing a piece on burn survivors and wanted to interview Brandon and his work at the clinic. "He mentioned you," the producer said. "Said you were instrumental in his recovery journey. Would you be willing to be interviewed?" "About what?" "About your relationship with Brandon. About how you supported him after the fire. About what it's like to watch someone you care about go through that kind of trauma." I thought about it. About the story they wanted versus the story I could tell. "I'll do the interview," I said. "But I want to tell the whole truth." The filming happened at my studio. The interviewer, a woman named Patricia, asked the expected questions first. How did I know Brandon? What was our relationship? How did I support him after the fire? I answered honestly, we'd dated. We'd broken up before the fire. I'd volunteered at the burn unit and reconnected with him there. I'd helped him through recovery as a friend. Then Patricia asked, "What made you want to help him after your relationship ended?" And I told the truth. I knew what was coming for him. Not psychically or anything, just practically. I knew that burn survivors face years of painful recovery, social stigma, depression, identity crisis. I knew because I'd researched it extensively. And I thought about how I'd want someone to show up for me if I was in his position. So I showed up. That's very compassionate. It's self-interested, actually. I wanted to prove to myself that I could help someone without sacrificing myself. That I could be kind without being consumed. That caring about someone doesn't mean losing yourself. Patricia leaned forward. "It sounds like you learned that lesson the hard way." "I learned it before I had to. That's the whole point." "What do you mean?" I looked directly at the camera. I mean, I chose myself. When I had the option to sacrifice everything for someone who wouldn't have appreciated it, I chose myself instead. And I don't regret it. Not even a little. The documentary aired 6 months later. My segment was brief, Maybe 3 minutes of the hour-long film. But those 3 minutes showed me saying clearly, I chose myself. And everyone was better for it. The response was immediate. My inbox flooded with messages from women thanking me, telling me their own stories of sacrifice and regret, asking how I'd known to choose differently. I responded to every single one the same way. Choose yourself. Not because you don't care about others, but because you can't help anyone if you destroy yourself trying. Brandon called after the documentary aired. You told them the truth. I did. I'm glad. Someone needs to say it. That martyrdom isn't love. That saving yourself first isn't selfish. That women are allowed to choose their own survival. Are you okay with how I framed things? Maya, you made me look better than I deserved. You could have told them I was a shallow asshole who would have abandoned you if positions were reversed. You just said we weren't compatible. That's generous. It's true. We weren't compatible. But we are now. As friends. That matters. It does. After we hung up, I looked at my studio. Full of design work, client projects, art pieces that meant something. All created by these two hands that I'd protected when everyone told me to be selfless. I thought about the other Maya again. The one who'd saved Brandon and lost everything. And I realized, she wasn't a different person. She was me making a different choice in impossible circumstances. She'd loved with her whole heart and paid the ultimate price. This Maya, this version had loved too. Just differently. Had loved herself enough to survive. Both were valid. Both were real. But only one got to build a life. 7 years after the fire, I was invited to speak at a conference about women in design. They wanted me to talk about building a business, managing clients, creating a successful creative practice. Instead, I talked about hands. I'm a designer, I told the audience of 300 women. I create with my hands. My hands are my livelihood, my art, my entire professional identity. And 7 years ago, I had to choose between my hands and someone I loved. I told them about Brandon. Not by name, but the story was clear. About the fire that was coming. About the choice to save myself instead of him. About the guilt and the recovery and the realization that choosing yourself isn't betrayal. Women are taught that our value comes from service, I said. From sacrifice. From how much we'll give up for others. And we're taught that keeping something for ourselves, especially when someone else needs it, is selfish. But I'm here to tell you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is save yourself first. The applause was thunderous. After the talk, dozens of women lined up to speak with me. To tell me their stories of sacrifice and regret. To thank me for permission to choose themselves. One woman, maybe 60 with kind eyes, waited until everyone else had left. I lost my hand, she said, holding up a prosthetic that looked far better than the one I'd had in my previous life. 30 years ago. Saved my son from a car accident. Lost my hand under the tire. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'd do it again. He was 3. But she paused. My husband left me anyway. Said he couldn't be with someone who was broken. And I spent 30 years wishing I could go back and make a different choice. Wishing I'd saved myself instead. But I couldn't. So I'm glad you could. I'm glad someone learned what I couldn't. We stood there, this woman and me, separated by 30 years and one fundamental choice. She'd sacrificed and lost everything. I'd chosen myself and gained everything. Thank you, she said. For proving it was possible. For showing that choosing yourself doesn't make you a monster. I needed to know that. You're not a monster either, I said. You saved your son. That matters. He doesn't speak to me anymore. Hasn't in 10 years. Says I embarrass him. The hand, you know. My heart broke for her. For the sacrifice that bought nothing but loss. For the lesson learned too late. I'm sorry, I said again. Me too. But I'm glad you're not. 8 years after the fire, Brandon got married. Sarah, his girlfriend of 4 years, in a small ceremony at his clinic. I was invited. I went. The ceremony was simple. No social media spectacle, no performance, just 2 people who understood scars and chose each other anyway. At the reception, Brandon pulled me aside. I need to tell you something. Okay. Sarah knows. About what you told me. About the other timeline where you saved me and I left you. I told her everything. Why? Because I needed her to know who I used to be. And who I became because you refused to let me stay that person. And she said something I need to share with you. What? She said thank you. For not saving me back then. Because if you had, I'd still be that shallow asshole, and we never would have met. My scars led me to her. And she wouldn't trade that for anything. I looked across the room at Sarah, talking animatedly with Brandon's mother, her own burn scars visible on her arms, completely unashamed. She's right, I said. You're good together. We are. And it's because we both know what it's like to lose something. To have to rebuild. To find out who you are when the surface gets stripped away. That's not something unburned people understand. No. It's not. Maya, I know I've thanked you 1,000 times. But I need to say it once more. Thank you for choosing yourself. Thank you for showing me that real strength isn't sacrifice. It's survival. And thank you for being my friend even though I didn't deserve it. You saved my life by refusing to save my life. And I will never stop being grateful for that. We hugged, careful of his still sensitive scars, my whole hands gentle on his shoulders. Be happy, I said. That's the only thanks I need. Be happy and be kind, and be nothing like the person you used to be. Deal. 10 years after the fire, I stood in my newly expanded studio looking at the wall where I displayed my favorite projects. Client work, personal art, the book cover I'd designed for a burn survivor's memoir, the branding for Brandon's clinic. All created with these hands. Both of them. Whole and functional and mine. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello. Is this Maya Chun? Yes. This is Ashley Morrison. I don't know if you remember me. I was dating Brandon Parker when the fire happened. At the Riverside Apartments. I remembered. The yoga instructor. The one who'd left Brandon when he was burned. I remember. I wanted to reach out because I saw the documentary. The one you were in. And her voice cracked. I need to tell you something. I need to confess. You don't owe me anything. I know. But I need to say it anyway. I left Brandon because I couldn't handle his scars. Because I was shallow and vain, and I only wanted him when he was perfect. And I've spent 10 years hating myself for it. Watching him rebuild his life, become this incredible person, marry someone real while I'm still alone because I can't maintain a relationship longer than 6 months. And I saw you in that documentary saying you chose yourself and I realized, I didn't choose myself. I chose vanity. I chose surface. I chose all the wrong things. And I need you to know that you were right. About everything. About what matters. About real strength. About choosing survival over sacrifice. You were right and I was wrong and I'm sorry. Ashley, I don't want forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that someone learned from your example. Even if they learned too late. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there holding my phone, thinking about Ashley. About Brandon. About the woman at the conference with the prosthetic hand. About all the people whose stories intersected with mine, whose choices rippled out in ways they'd never expected. And I thought about the other Maya. The one who'd sacrificed everything. She'd loved completely. Sacrificed totally. Given everything she had. And she'd died alone, broken, abandoned. This Maya, this version had loved too. Just smarter. Had given, but not everything. Had cared, but not at the cost of herself. And she'd lived. Built something real. Became someone whole. Both versions had made choices in impossible circumstances. But only one version understood the fundamental truth. You can't save someone by destroying yourself. You can only create 2 destroyed people. I walked to the window and held up my right hand. Fingers spread against the light. 10 years ago in another timeline, this hand had been crushed under burning wood, sacrificed for a man who'd abandoned me within weeks. Now it created art. Built businesses. Designed futures. It was mine. Whole. Functional. Free. And I would never apologize for choosing to keep it. The doorbell rang. My girlfriend Emma, not Brandon's Emma, my Emma, the architect I'd been dating for 2 years, let herself in with her key. Hey babe, you ready for dinner? Yeah. Just finishing up. Emma came up behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist, her chin resting on my shoulder, thinking deep thoughts. Thinking about choices, about what we sacrifice and what we keep, about the difference between love and self-destruction. Heavy for a Friday night. Someone from my past called, got me reflecting. Good reflections or bad? I looked at my hand again, Emma's arms around me, my studio full of work I'd created, my life full of choices I'd made. Good. Definitely good. I'm grateful for the life I chose, for the hand I kept, for learning the lesson before it cost me everything. That's very mysterious and philosophical. Are you going to explain? Someday. But not tonight. Tonight, let's just go to dinner and appreciate that we're both here, whole, choosing each other without destroying ourselves in the process. I can do that. We left the studio together, my right hand, whole undamaged, mine linked with hers. And I didn't look back. Because the Maya who'd sacrificed everything was gone, had died in another timeline, learning the hardest lesson too late. This Maya, this version, had learned early enough to make different choices, to build a different life, to understand that the greatest act of love isn't sacrifice. It's survival. And sometimes, saving yourself is the most heroic thing you can do.